On this special edition of This Week in SCC Sports, Coach Lambert hosted a roundtable with coaches and sports personalities. All that on This Week in SCC Sports.
I'm gonna fight 'em all. A seven-nation army couldn't hold me back. They're gonna rip it off. Taking their time right behind my...
Good afternoon and welcome to This Week in SCC Sports. I'm Fonzie Lambert and I'm kind of taking the lead here, okay, which is a familiar seat of Brandon Karam, the SCC man of the media. But today we're going to recognize and we're going to look at the careers of both the future and the past. We got to the right of me, we got Mr. Tony Izzo, who's a local legend as far as the media is concerned and promoting high school and youth athletics since 1970. We got Brandon Karam, who is the voice of the Saints, the current voice of the Saints. We got legendary coach, Hall of Fame coach in New York State, Damian Fantozzi, who has coached both basketball, boys and girls level at Saratoga Springs High School and is currently the girls varsity basketball coach here at Saratoga Catholic and track and field and cross country. And then we got over on the far right, we got David Spears. Dave Spears was a point guard here in the 1980s. He was an all-area player. His teams won from his junior year through his 4 years in college basketball, 20 games a season. And Dave played in many of the games that were telecast by Tony Izzo Productions. So I guess we're going to start the questions here with Tony. Tony, good to have you here.
Nice to be here.
Back in the Broadway area, Broadway Gym, not below the Broadway Gym.
Below the Broadway.
Tony, how did it all start?
Simple. I was a student at Saratoga, and we established an audiovisual department. And with that being said, we purchased some equipment. They were half-inch reel-to-reel. Remember that, Coach? Half-inch black and white reel-to-reel. And we coached taped the games for Coach Bill Stanley. I said, for his instructional purposes. I said, do you mind if I do a little play-by-play? Not at all. He said, I'll just turn the volume down, that's all. So we did that. Then we got into regular TV production. And then I graduated in '71. And they hired me out of school as the audiovisual person.
Wow. So just a year out of high school you were hired, and did you have anybody under you when you were working?
We had a student AV club,
Okay.
which consisted of John Meady, Phil Kahn, Guy Wright, and then other students as
So
well.
that's how they got their start.
That's correct.
Okay. So now during the 1970s, okay, you were basically the voice of the Streaks.
I was.
Okay.
Proud of it.
And you did the high school basketball games and the high school football games.
Correct.
Okay. Well, one of the coaches during the 1970s over at Saratoga Springs High School, okay, won a lot of games over at Saratoga with the Blue Streaks, had some great teams over there, is Coach Damian Fantozzi. And Damian, what do you remember about Tony Izzo back then and just promoting the athletes, giving them like a spotlight?
Well, first of all, everybody loved Tony. I mean, because he was so enthusiastic, and he came up with this idea, and he would, I would sit with him. We would have lunch together once in a while in his AV room, and we watched the tapes, and it was just great to watch him do it. And I said, Tony, you could do something with this, and he took the ball and ran with it.
So what happened is that at halftime I went in the locker room and I talked to my guys, and I said, fellas, I said, this half is over with. We can't look back at it. We can't dwell on the negative aspect of the way we played. So what we have to look at is the 16 minutes that are ahead of us. And the way we're going to conquer our deficit is we have to take 2 points away from them and get 2 points back. And we have to be very patient with that fact that we can't get all 18 points back at once. So we went out and we played one outstanding man-to-man defense. Bobby Knight would have been proud of me if he saw us. And we were denying the ball over the court, and we proceeded to outscore Glens Falls 24-2. And we were ahead at the end of the third quarter.
And most of the years, every year, he was the public address announcer. He was the voice of the Streaks.
He was.
Right. And then Tony's career expanded into what was then called Tony Eisel Productions, Tip Productions. And he even got the nickname Tip, and brought Guy Wright with him, and also brought in a color man, which was Skip Spenceri on a lot of his telecasts. And most of those great games in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, he moved over and worked those games at Saratoga Catholic.
By the St. Spears, Drew Couture, fast break basketball, lays it in.
And Saratoga Catholic had some phenomenal basketball teams under Bob King. And what do you remember about those games at the Broadway Gym?
Well, the place was filled up above us every Tuesday and Friday night. And we had a number of coaches along with Bob King that filled the seats over there.
Didn't they call him King and his court?
King and his court, right there.
Absolutely. He jumped out in front of us, and we came back, and that's the kind of game it was. We played very hard against them.
You mentioned the late 80s. I remember one sequence of games when Scott Cherry was here. We beat, we beat Waterville at the buzzer with Scott Cherry shot with 1 second to go, right?
Civic Center.
Civic Center, excuse me, Civic Center.
The Saints down by 1. 5 seconds. The ball goes up.
And then with 1 second to go, Andre Cook heaved one, and it bounced off the basket, and we won the game.
Could be close to 2 seconds. Here we go. The Saints will win the basketball game.
Year later, a rematch. Okay? Last second, where the Saints were up by 1. Andre Cook with the ball this time, banks it in, Saints lose.
The ball goes up. Good. That's the game. What a lead Andre Cook did this year. It didn't go last year, but it did this year.
I mean, I got a lot of memories, but if I had to pick out one, that's forward.
Now those early years, in the early years, the first Bob King basketball team to go to the finals was the 83-84 team. 83-84 team, which Dave was the point guard on. And many times you were here, and you used to give a trophy out for the player of the game.
We did.
Right? Dave, can you tell us about those years with Tony Eisel Productions? I mean, the place was crazy, right?
I mean, back then, Tony was a blue streak, but then he became a Saint. And for us, it was a nice thing. And his interviews after the games, at times we're excited, you're a kid, you just won a game. You wanted to get out of there, but you also had the ability to get asked questions by Tony, and you were on TV. So for a teenage kid, hey, we were on tip. That's all you can say. I was on tip last night, you weren't,
Spears. Nice pass. Cherry lays it up and in a foul.
And we won. We had a lot of success here. The crowds were crazy. I mean, I remember the Christmas tournament in 84-85 where they were about 6 deep on the baselines. And I went for a steal, and I knocked out like 10 people, during the game.
And
we beat Boston Spot. But that's what it was, the fun of Tony being there, with Skip being there at games. Once in a while, John Cantone would come in, but that's another story we'll get into later. But just the ability to be on TV, have those tapes. You gave me a couple tapes a couple years ago. I put them on CDs. I was a lot thinner back in those days, so I kind of like watching them.
Me too.
But everything that Tony did for us as student athletes was phenomenal, and I appreciate that.
And the thing with Tony, I think that people got to understand is, and I know people do realize, is that he was, when he came to town, when he came to your school, and he was broadcasting the game. It was a big deal, and you moved from after the Spa Catholic and after Saratoga. You actually were hired by the section, correct?
But yeah, the New York State Athletic Association wanted to do a game of the week. all around the Capital District. And then in these games, we inserted anti-drug and anti-alcohol spots. And that was a big thing for the section too. And we started televising the games in 1875. And Bill Higgins and his committee took a look at us, and we did that, and away we went.
That's fantastic. And Tony's also the recipient of the Dutch Holland Award, which is one of the most prestigious awards in Section 2 basketball, and that was a great thrill for you.
Yeah, it was, especially with that gentleman you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dave, you remember Dutch Holland?
Yeah, he was a phenomenal coach at Bishop Scully. I remember after my freshman year in the sectional game, we got beat by Mechanicville, and he said, "Mr. Spears, you're going to be a good player for Coach King." And I
Wow.
said, "Thank you." And
Coming from him, that's big, isn't it?
absolutely.
Now, if I remember, Coach Fantozzi was your color guy for a couple games, right?
A couple of games, and along with John Catone, he didn't last long.
I only lasted 2 games.
You did, you were on with us a couple of times too. Yes.
That's right. Are you familiar with our guy next to you, Brandon Caron?
Boy, I am, and I'll tell you, if I may steal the show for a moment, this guy has got it all over me. I mean, I started, I had to grow into what it did today, okay? I got better as the years went on. I listened to him doing the PA announcing right here in the gym, your baseball, and you are no nonsense, you articulate, and I'll tell you something, your dad and yourself, you gotta be proud. Because I've gone into different gyms and listened to different public address announcers, and it's all nonsense. You have fun, but it's all business, and boy, you got something going for yourself.
Thank you.
You do.
Well, I can kind of piggyback on that because it's funny. I never recruited, okay, a public address announcer, but I did Brandon, okay, at the Little League games. And I heard this kid announce Little League games, and I'm like, my God, this kid's unbelievable. So I met his dad at Stewart's, and we had a cup of coffee, and I said, George, listen, I want this guy to be our announcer in 6th grade. So he came over here in 6th grade. He took over the reins as the public address announcer for the games at Saratoga Catholic.
I wanted this game, by the way, but you took it away from me.
And did all the baseball games, and then it just blew up. And I know his, Brandon. Before further ado, let's hear your side. What you've always wanted to be a public address announcer or a sportscaster, right?
Well, we first started back at Little League Baseball, and I did a couple games, and I was like, wow, I really like doing this. It sounded fun to me, so and now it's just grown into this. But yeah, I've always wanted to be a sports.
And is there any sportscaster anybody on ESPN Sports Center that you really admire?
Vince Scully.
Vince
One
Scully.
of my favorites.
Wow.
Yeah, I love Vince Scully. And just really any announcer that I can learn something from or pick up just a little.
Old school, Vince Scully was the color commentator and in public address and did it all, right?
Yes, he did.
Right.
Dr. Stadium.
Now, so you've done the public address for the baseball, basketball. You've done softball. You also have an experience, right, with the Hall of Famers over in Cooperstown.
Yes, for the past 2 years, I've gone to the Hall of Fame Classic in Cooperstown, New York. It's a bunch of ex-MLB players and then a couple Hall of Famers. So the first year I went, I got to do 1 inning of PA. And then last year, we started the sports show. And we were able to go down onto the field and talk with Ozzie Smith and Raleigh Fingers.
Wow.
And then,
Wow, he's right.
Yeah. And I also got to do an inning of PA. So yeah, it's been a really good experience for me. Welcome back to this week in SCC Sports. I'm here at Doubleday Field in Cooperstown, New York for the Hall of Fame Classic. And I had the opportunity to interview Hall of Famers Ozzie Smith and Raleigh Fingers. Reporting from Doubleday Field in Cooperstown, New York, I'm Brandon Carroll, SCC Sports Media. We're here with 13-time Gold Glover and 2002 inductee Ozzie Smith. Ozzie, what brings you back to the Hall of Fame Classic every year?
The fans and having the opportunity to hang out with these guys. It's always a special time. A lot of these guys I haven't seen in a while, so being able to be a part of this, and it's always exciting.
Raleigh, what brings you back to a Hall of Fame Classic every year?
Just get a chance to come back and see some guys that played ball against and have a good time, play a game, try not to get hurt.
And you've done everything from, now you were also the public address announcer for, was it the Little League regionals? Or?
Yeah, so a couple years ago in Rome, New York, they had the 8U Little League regionals. So I did a bunch of games in that. I did the championship game and a couple of the qualifying games in that.
Fantastic. Now, the sports show, which is just awesome, by the way. I have so many local schools that have commented, athletic directors, they found it on YouTube and they said, this kid's got talent, and what a service you do for all the kids in school. What I always say is, how can you make others around you better? You do that by just showing up with your microphone, videoing these games, and getting to, interview these kids. But you go everywhere. I mean, you and your dad, tell me, just give me for instance, like say during the fall, what would be your fall schedule?
All right, so in fall is definitely the most amount of sports because you have golf, you have cross country, you have volleyball, and then you have soccer. And now here we have a JV soccer team for boys, a varsity soccer team for boys, and a girls soccer team. So there's 3 soccer teams, and you also have the golf team, and then 2 cross country teams, coached by Coach Fantozzi. But it's very hectic in the fall, and just about every day we're out recording.
But it seems like you're there. You're always there. And you cover all these teams, and you got footage of all these teams. It's remarkable what you do and the amount of time you put in.
And the production, I'm sorry.
The production is unbelievable.
Is the editing, and you cut into you're hosting it, you cut into an interview. That's big time.
Thank you.
It really is.
Thank you.
Coach Fantozzi, mature above his years when he's interviewing you. And
oh yeah, this isn't a high school kid talking to me. He really knows. He knows what to do. I can tell he studied what the other guys are doing. Like you said, Vince Scully, whatever. I mean, that's how you learn. Like that's how athletes learn too, how to play. Absolutely. By watching the better players.
Absolutely. So, Dave, you've been interviewed by Brandon, and I know you're a big fan. You've commented to me a bunch of times how great it is for the school. What's your thoughts?
I just think, like during basketball season last year, whether it was a JV game or varsity game, when Brandon and I talked, he's got great questions. He knows exactly what went on during the game, so he's not going into this blind. The coach said he did his homework. If he wants to talk about a press, he knows exactly what kind of press we were in, or what we were doing on the court. And that's all the credit to him. For someone his age to be at that level already, he's got a long career ahead of him. So hopefully this part will help him and get him where he wants to go someday.
Tony, you're back working. You're back with doing podcasts now.
With Spectrum Sports, they called me a couple weeks ago. Greg Bobbitt, who was the guy at the Capital Vision Cable in Albany, and when we started taping the games for the Capital District, I gave my tapes to him. So he knew me. And he gave me a call a couple weeks ago and says, hey, you want to do some webcast? And I'm the B team. The A team goes on the live television. These are live, but yeah, they called me back and we're doing it again, yes.
You know what I would like to see?
What's that?
This is what I would like to see. I would like to see Tony Izzo and Brandon Karam work one game before Brandon Karam graduates from Saratoga Catholic. Whether it's a basketball game, a football game, or whatever, I think it would be terrific.
Well, show me up, though. But that's good, though. That's good.
That's good.
That's good.
That's good.
That's a good idea, seriously.
I think that would be a great connection there.
It would. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for spending some time with us and reminiscing about the past and the future of Brandon Karam and Tony. Thank you for coming in, Coach. Thank you for coming in, Coach Spears.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week on This Week in SCC Sports.
Stay tuned.